Hi, everyone, and welcome to our panel at Gen Con Online in 2020. My name is Helena. I'm here with Michael Shinall and Eric Lang.
Hello, Gen Con. How are you? Social distancing Gen Con 2020.
Virtual convention season.
Yeah. Well, we are here today to talk about how your favorite games came to be. So the whole process from the very first draft to the game on the shelf, right? And I'm here with two veteran board game designers. Can you guys, perhaps we can start with you guys in talking about how you got to design board games in the first place.
Yeah, Michael.
Okay, I'm starting this off. Fantastic. So, unlike our seasoned expert here, Eric, who apparently lived and breathed board games from the very moment he was wee high to the how old are you now exactly, Eric?
Old enough.
Good old enough. I actually kind of fell into doing board games just right around 10 years ago or so. I was actually lived just down the street from Cool Mini or Not when it was just getting started up and everything. They used to run a lot of local events, our game stores and tournaments. And actually at the time I was working for the police department, and we'd actually all just gotten laid off due to extreme budget cuts. And so Cool Mini or Not was actually just kind of starting up. The zombie side Kickstarter just happened, that was being fulfilled, and things were starting to pick up. And I was actually one of the first employees brought in when the company basically started there, and just kind of fell into doing game design there, from doing like freelance stuff, writing like tactics articles and doing things like that, to where I am now.
And I guess, as Michael said, I was born with a meeple in my hand and a box of Stratego in the other, and here I am today.
Funny enough, Stratego is like the earliest game that I remember owning.
Same, yeah. Stratego is the game that brought me online, as it were. That was the game that was the game that made me realize that, oh my God, this is what I do. I do this now. I guess Helena probably wants a little more detail. So I've worked for, I've been a game designer professionally since 1998. I started the hard way, starting my own publisher, hiring all my friends, going broke, self-publishing a game that did well enough to get us to a second game that broke us. And then made really good friends with people at Fantasy Flight, Alder Entertainment at the time. I worked with Fantasy Flight for almost 10 years as a contractor pseudo employee, designing all of their CCGs to start, and then onto their living card games. Designed a bunch of their big box board games, consulted on a lot of their big games. Went to video games for 5 years, and then came back to board games to work with CMON, starting with Chaos Ball back in 2012. And Arcadia Quest, and I don't remember the order now. I think then it was Blood Rage, and the Blood Rage kind of changed everything, and that turned us in that typecast me as the area control board game guy. So that became a trilogy, and now we're doing this. And then I met Michael, and life has never been worse.
Well, it's good to see I've made a difference. At the end of the day, that's really all that matters.
So both answers were quite unexpected, but anyway. Anyway, you both have been doing this for a while now, so you probably have different processes, but could you run us, like, how do you start designing a board game? Does it begin with the theme, or does it begin with an idea or for a mechanic, or how does it start?
Yes.
Okay, next
no simple
question.
Answers.
It does. So, like, Michael, you would like every game is different, right? Every game requires a completely new process. It should, right? If we want to be challenging ourselves to do better with every game. Plus, we also game design is as much art as it is science. So like your process should be maturing and changing and evolving as time goes on. But since Michael and I are both here and we both worked on on Bloodborne, the board game, a really big one, we could talk about that a little bit, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's a little different because like we're coming into basically an existing world, and that gives us some predefined guidelines, and that I think is actually one of the, as you said, the process is very malleable. You can't look at it the same way every time you approach something because there's just so many different things to consider. Because when it comes to like a licensed game, we're coming in there with kind of a predefined set of rules or expectations or themes or settings that you kind of have to be respectful for to play in. Versus if you're coming up with your own idea, sometimes you just have like a really cool mechanic or something that you might want to work with, or a really cool setting or something. So there's no like basic answer about like you're always starting from the same point. It's you kind of get randomly dropped into a project and you don't even know where you've started, because it might be theme, it might be mechanics, and then you just kind of have to explore out and find like, okay, well, what's the rest of this going to offer?
Right. I remember, so with Bloodborne was interesting because we came in, I had designed a card game for Bloodborne, which is very different. It was designed to be a much broader game for a much broader audience. So when we had the board game, not only did we want to do Bloodborne, a good treatment of a big miniature game for Bloodborne, but we also wanted to differentiate from the card game and aim it very, very squarely at the CMON Kickstarter audience, right? Who we've gotten to know quite well now, and so we wanted a game that like not only was fun to play, because we aim that for all our games, but a game that sounded like where the promise of the game, just the pitch of the game, got you intrigued about the way we adapted Bloodborne, right? Because we didn't want to do a straight up adaptation. We didn't want to just try to simulate the board game, the computer game in board game form, which is a unique challenge for games that are licensed off of games from another medium, right? As opposed to games licensed from movies.
I mean, the big thing is like in these situations, like you said, you have the video game, it exists. So you have to create a different experience for the user than just playing the video game. Because if they're just playing an analog version of the video game, well, that's not really doing it. The thing is that especially in these situations, you want to view it as you want to create a game that if you took away the IP and everything, it would still be a good game. You get the luxury of working with an established setting, with an established world that has rich, lore or things that are set up. So you get, and again, I view that as a luxury. You get to have that, but it's also important to always incorporate that. But at the same time, you have to make a good game. You can't just make something that's being carried by the IP. I mean, I know that there's that, over the last 20, 30 years, you've had that stigma about like video game based movies where it's like, this is a terrible movie, but it has this video game tied into it, and therefore that's supposed to carry it. And people have that stigma when anything's tied with an IP, and that's the risk that you run into with here. Is it's a Bloodborne board game. Well, we can't just let the Bloodborne IP carry it. If you took that away, is this still a good game? That's the fundamentals you have to get down to. Just you happen to have the luxury here of, hey, this is a really kick-ass and cool IP, so we get to use that.
Right. Yeah. Right. And so in this particular case, obviously we came at it from the theme, right? But because we wanted to interpret the game differently. We wanted to go, we were looking for a core essence, right? What's the essence of Bloodborne? And now Michael you started playing Bloodborne around the time we were working on this, right? And became like a crazy expert in a very short amount of time.
That's something for myself is like when you have, Eric, a larger number of raw number of IPs than I have, but that is something that I hold fundamentally like as a conviction, is that if we're working with an IP, you have to know that IP and you have to be able to do it justice first and foremost, because you're not just, if you mess up, you're not just messing up a project that you did, you're messing up someone else's vision and someone else's art. And that is really unacceptable to me. So every time I'm working with an IP, the first thing that I have to do is become an absolute just encyclopedic expert in that IP. So, when we were talking about doing Bloodborne, I had never played the video game. I knew that the thing about them, like, oh, they're supposed to be hard and everything. But the second that I was actually like put on that project, I started playing through that game to the point now where I have played through it literally countless times. Like there's 13 trick weapons in the game. I've beaten the game at least 13 times, once each weapon, just full playthrough, and then again countless times just from checking out different areas, checking out different bosses. Like I can literally just blind play through that, and then that's on not even on topic of reading through the official strategy guides, the official encyclopedias that are released, the fan theories, the internet videos, just all of this stuff here to make sure that you understand that IP, but more so like not just the setting of the lore, but why people like it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so funny thing is we had an interesting duality here, right? Because I've done a number of games with different co-designers, and it's always a different dynamic, right? In some cases, I'm the expert that knows everything about it, but I always believe there should be counterweights on both sides. So I had played Bloodborne to work on the card game, but I wasn't an expert because I'm really bad at Soulsborne game. Oh my God, I'm bad at it. Now, I played Dark Souls before, and Bloodborne was like, oh, it's Dark Souls without a block button. Oh my God.
It actually just became lucky for me that I fell in love with that series once I started playing it, to the point where like all of those games are like by far above everything else for me. Like I fell in love with that series, so that was lucked out on that.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it doesn't hurt when it's a really excellent game. So what the one thing I want to be sure of was that so I stopped when Michael went crazy all the way into like all deep into the rabbit hole. I stopped playing to make sure that I could be a counterweight and go like, all right, we have to make sure this is accessible at all times and we don't go too deep in the rabbit hole. So we would always attack it from two angles, right? Michael with deep encyclopedic knowledge of every possible aspect of the game, and me going, hey, remember Joe Casual? And that worked out pretty well, actually.
Yeah, it was a good counterweight because a lot of people are going to go like, well, you didn't recreate mechanics from the game one for one, or, why does this function differently than the game? And that circles back to the point that this needs to be a fun game before anything else. And it needs to have the feel of the setting, but sometimes things just don't transfer over. Like, I know that one thing that we had done early on was like the lamps. So like technically hunters, you can go back to the dream via lamps. And that was supposed to be the point. Well, in the board game version, you can go back anywhere instead of just the lamps, but those are where you respawn in. So that way we were able to keep the feeling of how they function and the importance that they have, but without the one-for-one trade-off to exactly how they function in the game, because sometimes it just doesn't, it's not a good trade-off.
Absolutely. And I mean, I told you, Helena, we're going to stick, you asked us a question, we're going to stick to it. But there's a couple of examples. I remember very specifically with Bloodborne, right? Michael and I sat around, we talked about, both of us are well-versed in board games and we have different backgrounds. Michael actually comes from Michael ran Dark Age and Wrath of Kings miniature game lines for CMON. So he's got a really strong background in modern and cutting edge miniature games.
My main backgrounds don't actually come from so much like core board games. Like growing up, it was mainly like CCGs and miniature war games. Board games existed, but Eric is by far, that's his wheelhouse.
Right. I was also from CCGs, but yeah, board games was a thing for me. So big time. So, but the point was that we sat around and we talked about, so what is the core emotional loop of Bloodborne? Not mechanical loop, just think about what the emotional loop is, right? And I remember this conversation clearly. We were talking about like, really what this is scientific method with your life as the timeline, right? So like you're figuring out how to beat monsters by getting killed, figuring out why you got killed, learning their attacks, going back in, doing it again. That's Bloodborne, right? It's the death cycle of figuring out how to beat a monster. So we did that. We used deck building as a primary mechanic in this. Because if you think about it, if you break it down to its essence, deck building is kind of the scientific method of gaming, right? You look at a spread of stuff. This is my hypothesis is I'm going to combo these number of cards and build this type of deck in order to win. You play it out, you repeat, you let the rinse repeat, you build, you test, you assume, you fail, you move, you change and move on, etc. So we did that, except with lots and lots more deck. That's like the real under the hood way of looking at it mechanically. But that's the game designer nucleus of that game.
Once a project is kind of fleshed out a bit to where we've defined it a little bit, one of the things I always do is what is the core feeling? Because feeling to me is very important. Like, what experience are we trying to give a player when they're playing this game? And with Bloodborne, a lot of people go like, "Oh, it's just frustratingly hard," but that's not really it. That's from a very broad outsider perspective to it. And I'm getting a little like, hipster here. It's like, "Oh, you don't understand the real nuances of my new show, Bloodborne." But no, it's
actually
honestly
about cats, right?
No, but okay. I'd like to, if you want to give the grandiose one there, it's like, only through strife and turmoil do we grow, and we just want you to grow as people. So, that is how we want you to, expand your horizons here. Is, you're going to get that challenge, and it's going to be frustrating, but eventually you're going to overcome, or it's going to destroy you. But either way, you experience change and hopefully growth.
That's right. And it is fair, right? Like, Bloodborne is hard, but it's fair. When you actually manage to win, you really feel like you earned it.
Mm-hmm. And that's to me the core experience, is overcoming obstacles, but knowing that you did it because you outsmarted it, you grew, you chose correctly, and that's actually one of the reasons why we wanted to mitigate all luck, and that was one of the core tenets for doing that game. Is like, we wanted to minimize luck the absolute most we could, because that's a hollow victory. If you won because of dice rolls or something like that, then that's not the core experience.
Right. I mean, there is variance in the game, right? There's randomness and variance, but the randomness in the game is to make it replayable and to force you into a new puzzle every dungeon.
And not make it just a math equation, because I mean, that's actually another trapping, when some people can design games and whatnot, is that they forget the fun. And it's like one of my mantras, like, when you're making a system work and everything, make it work and then break it like 10%, because that's really where your fun's going to be.
Okay, so
that was your first question.
Yeah, what I got from that answer is that in licensed games, you start with the feeling. For non-licensed games, is that different?
It's more than a feeling. Did you hear it? Did you hear it? The earworm? No?
Yeah. We have 40 minutes left in this panel, don't we?
So, I mean, it's not fundamentally different, right? Like, games are like, no matter what, every game is, people play games because they make them feel smart, but they enjoy games because they make them feel something, right? They make them feel some emotion. It's not always, it's not only because games are clever. So I'm a big believer in the emotional truth of any game you play, right? Is this game supposed to be frustrating? Is it supposed to be frantic? Is it supposed to be whimsical? Is hilarious, mean, safe? Like, so many different, and it's usually never one thing, right? It is some alchemy of emotions you want them to feel, intersectionally, right? So I want to feel safe when it's like frustrating, and then safe, but only safe after frustration, like that kind of thing, right? But when you're working on an original IP, so Michael's answer is probably going to be very different. I'm kind of interested in hearing this too. For an original IP, I generally work on the IP first. Like, I in my other life, I'm a writer. I do a lot of writing for fun, for self. I used to write all the web content for Fantasy Flight when I was working for them. I love writing. I'm a better game designer, though. I'm an okay writer, but I'd still love doing it. And so I flesh out the IP, right? What is the core conflict of the IP? What is the core drama? Who are the players? Who are people supposed to relate to? Why do they relate to them? What are their fundamental needs? What is standing in the way of their needs? And that's for the, I mean, I can be all pretentious about the internal versus the external journey and all that stuff, but I try to develop that from a personal standpoint. And then from there, at that point, I'm just licensing my own game, right? I'm not licensing a game off of this IP.
Yeah, it kind of just rolls into, again, the idea. And actually, so funny enough, I don't think our answers are that different, because to me, games are about crafting an experience. What do you want a player to actually have when they're sitting down for this session? Because there's a billion games out there, and even beyond games, there's a billion things that people can do to occupy their time. So to me, you're not selling you're not selling so much a product. You're selling an experience here. Like when people go to see movies or play games, they can play them because they're fun. They can see them because they're entertaining, but you're trying to get something from that experience. And to me, board games are no different from that. So that's always one of the core things: is what experience are we trying to sell someone here? And try to get them to, and I don't mean just like, monetary. I mean, what are we trying to actually like pitch to you? What are we trying to give you? So like one of the first games I worked on was Rum and Bones, which that whole thing was supposed to be like high adventures on the high seas as a pirate, captain. And you were supposed to feel like this big, grandiose, like larger than life swashbuckling pirate, just, complete badass. And that's, if at any point you're playing the game and you are not feeling that, then that is a failing of the game. Xeno Shift, actually the first technical board game I worked on, that is, very kind of like you're playing, a space, basically like kind of Space Marines, troopers trying to defend outposts against these waves and waves of alien attacks. But you're supposed to feel this tense, just complete, like overwhelming feeling, like you're only just barely struggling to, to stay on. At the same time, though, you have to realize that you are actually playing this big faceless corporation that are just crunching numbers here of like this amount of troop casualties are what is acceptable for us to continue our profits here. So it's putting you in that mindset as well. So you kind of have this like it's much like those kind of parodies that you'll see in those style of movies and whatnot. Just saying like Starship Troopers or whatnot, those feelings. But it's always about the experience. So what do we want someone to feel when they're playing this game? Do we want them to feel like frustrated and terrified, like when they're seeing like a horror movie? Or do we want them to feel like, just really empowered and, just like the one guy who can stand up against the entire army, which, that's actually just tying into some minor spoilers here or whatnot, talking about like the Masters of the Universe game that we have upcoming. That is, I have the power. You have a world, a universe full of legendary, just like iconic characters there, and you need to feel powerful in every single thing you do. Like, you need to feel like a master of the universe. Like, yes, I can go and take down 100 guys. I'm He-Man, of course I can. Or yes, I can take down a planet. I'm Skeletor. Yeah.
That was more Dave Chappelle than Skeletor.
I'll take it. That's a compliment too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, exactly right. So there was, I remember. There's a thought, and I know that some people are going to take this the wrong way, but like I'm like, if this game does not make me feel 13 years old in the good way, something wrong, right? And that it's super important, right? Because it's designed to tap into a very primal nostalgia, right? When we were, I don't know how many of you guys watched He-Man at a formative age. I have any of you tried watching one of those as a kid and then coming back and watching them as an adult? Completely different experiences, right? But when you watch it as an adult, quite often you are reliving your experiences of watching it as a kid. And it brings all that back. That's why it's so powerful. We did that too. Sorry, go ahead.
When I think about those moments of, like my inner child, now granted, there's kind of like just a hole there now where that was, but I get the idea. Like, oh man, when I was a kid watching this, this was crazy. I guess the closest for me would be like, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, G.I. Joe, He-Man, like those were, all like, the empowerment shows on Saturday morning. You sit down and, your week, you've just been like this average, 8 to 13-year-old, whatever. But now you're a superhero, or, you're one of the crew, or, you're a G.I. Joe out there, protecting, everything from Cobra, or in, some cases cheering for Cobra because they had the cooler toy line.
That's true. And yeah, it's got to be inspiring at the end of the day.
Inspiring. That's actually the best term to use there. Now, you can be inspired for great goods of heroicism or evil, depending on which type of kid you were growing up. But hey, there's no wrong answer. I mean, there's just as many fans out there of like Skeletor as there was, Prince Adam, who is a dork, by the way.
I mean, spoiler alert, I wonder who Michael sides with.
Merman.
Oh my God, I remember. Oh my God, I remember that voice. Sorry.
It's fine. I was looking at some questions we have coming in the comment section, and I picked one, and I wanted to throw it to you guys. What was the most difficult game for you guys to design? Which was the most fun?
Fun.
The most
Fun.
difficult
I'm gonna
one.
steal. I'm gonna
and the
steal
most
Michael's
fun.
answer. I'm gonna preempt and steal Michael's answer. Fun. What's that? It's weird. Fun, at least for myself. Game design is basically pain with moments of sheer inspiration, right? Not just sheer elation. So they're like the shower inspiration that helps you solve a bunch of problems elegantly, or the idea that makes everything glue together. That's amazing, right? That is a high that will get you through all the rest of it. But most of it's pain. It's mostly I'm making a bunch of stuff that sucks, doesn't work. I see the game I see the experience I want. What's on the table is not that. And so I have to slog through it while torturing my friends until it gets there. Luckily, our playtesters are very infinitely patient with us. And they only play the game that's in front of them, and not the unattainable the unattainable utopian vision that we've got for us. So I've never had fun designing a game, to be honest, right? It's fulfilling. I'd never do anything else. But fun, heck no.
Yeah, I actually cannot refute that sentence in any way. You know, the old comments about love what you do and you'll never work a day in your life. That is true, but at no point in that sentence did it say you're going to have fun every single day, because that is not the same thing. You know, because at the end of the day, you know, this is still a job, and like anyone who is passionate about what they do, and hopefully that's anyone that pursues a career, you know, you can admit that you enjoy what you're doing, but is it necessarily fun every single day? Well, no, because there are some aspects that are more frustrating than others, and there's some that are really payoff. But you know, it's the end when you see like that final product. You know, it's like, here's the final product that we put together, and you look at it and you go, wow, I could do so much better this time. Because
That's
it's like
right. Yep. Yep.
it's the artist's dilemma, where, you know, as you're working on a project, you should be perpetually improving your skill and your craft. So by the time you're done with that project, you are better than when you started. Therefore, you could have done a better job learning through the whole process, which is a terrifying concept for any creative person, but also a stark reality of it. So
Absolutely.
that's
I mean, and at the end of the day, like, I mean, we are like, we're so gifted and blessed to do what we're doing, right? Like I love that I do this every day. So I don't want to be glib or complainy or whatever, right? Like this.
oh yeah,
It's
definitely don't
like,
want to come across as like jaded or anything, or like, you know,
this is
this is great to do,
right.
but it's
But this is a problem. So Michael and I are both results oriented designers, right? So that's different people, right? Some people are all about the journey, right? Oh, I love every step of it, and that's fine. I enjoy many parts of that. Well, I enjoy most parts of that, but at the end of the day, we have these impossible standards we're trying to hit, and we're not there yet. So that's a driving force, that momentum that moves us forward, right? So like we're working right now as we speak. I am putting the final touches on Ankh, which is the third Mythic game that is going to on the core box. So with our development team, Marco and Leo, we are we're dotting the I's and crossing the T's. We're having the most painful discussions about every tiny little change about that game, and discussions about hours. I swear to God, hours about whether we put in the word "the" or not in one of the Ankh power description power. Like it's now I kind of live for that. I love that, but of course it's frustrating and tedious and whatever. And I'm sick of the game at this point, as are our developers, and we're done. 7 months later, we're going to come back, forgetting all this, see the fruits of our labors, and be like, pretend somebody else designed it, and be like, yeah, this is great. I can't believe this one somehow got out.
You know, it's like it's funny, you know, you're talking about like the sort of mini editing process there, but that almost becomes like a little mini game to me, you know, whenever you enter that stage of development where it's going to be like, okay, here we've done everything, we think it all works. Now let's read through everything and see exactly how someone's going to misinterpret this or how they could break it if they accidentally read it the wrong way. And that's just as much an important process as almost anything else, because as you said, you know, are we going to add a the or an and or an if here? And how is someone going to potentially misinterpret that or misread it to now break everything that's associated with it? That's almost like a fun little mini game that you as a designer or developer get to do later in the process. You know, you just have to view that as fun, right?
Right. Well, that's the polish stage, right? And people, if you don't work in games, it's really easy to underestimate how important and how what's the word I'm looking and how mountainous the task of polish really is, right? It is about art because it's more art than science, right? There's not a single correct way to polish a game. We have there are opposing forces and that have tension in every aspect of a game. We need to be clear and comprehensible by every possible member of the audience, but we don't want a wall of text on every component. So we want to use as much brevity to explain as clearly and as broadly as possible. So we end up basically taking roles in our team, right? I'm the brevity guy, right? I'm like, yes, I know that's clear, but you don't get 5 lines of text, right? And Marco, my developer, is on the lines of like, well, somebody in Poland on Tuesday may interpret this slightly differently. And so we end up going back and forth, and eventually we come up with something that does the job as best as possible, or we've decided what bugs we're willing to leave in the game, right? This is an important part, and I definitely want to address this, right? Because Michael and I talk about this a lot. People think that game development is about perfecting a game. It's not that at all, right? There's no such thing as perfect, right? Perfect is like heroin addiction, right? It's you never get the dragon. There's no such thing. So it's
Life Lessons with Eric Lang. Thank you for tuning in, Gen Con 2020. Remember, kids, if you chase heroin, you'll never get that dragon.
No, it is perfect doesn't exist. So what development is a method of deciding what imperfections we're going to leave in the game to suit the particular audience that we're going for. Because no matter what, once you get to a certain stage of development, anything you fix is going to break something else. Always, guaranteed. There's no such thing. I mean, there are obvious choices you can make, right? Well, this card is clearly broken because you misworded it. Fine, that's obvious. That's not development. That's just common sense. Development's making the hard choices about who we're going to upset or who we're not going to serve as well with this particular facet of the game in order to serve the rest of the game.
When it comes down to like technical editing and things like that, I mean, that's a different beast than when you're going for, you know, mechanical or feeling edit. Because technical editing, I'm of the mindset like, yes, make things as clear and concise as you can, but there's always going to be a chance that someone can misinterpret or misread something. But you're not catering to like the 10% who's going to try that, because you know that you can't, because they're gonna, even if you made things perfect, they're gonna find some way anyway. So you have to understand, like, you know, where your limits lie. But when it comes to like mechanical or like developmental editing, you have to understand, like, you're not making a product for everyone, and there's always gonna be some aspect that someone might not like, and it's okay if a game is not for someone. That's something that a lot of like designers and developers, I think, you know, kind of fall into a trapping of trying to cater to every conceivable person that could potentially pick up this game. Like, if you like horror movies, you know, you might like horror movies, you might not like romance movies, you might not like romantic comedies. I don't go to see a romantic comedy and then start complaining that this plot's really dumb and hackneyed, or, you know, something like that, because that movie is clearly not for me. Nobody was killed in the woods. maybe some romantic comedies can kind of. Anyway, that's a sidetrack. But point is that like you can not like a game because it's not for you. That doesn't make it a bad game. That doesn't make it a good game. It's just I don't like what style we're playing. Like, and that's fine. It's just that people need to designers and developers specifically need to recognize that, because I feel that one of the big trappings is a lot of people are trying to make a game that is to appeal to the widest audience possible. And if something comes up where it's like, well, this certain type of player, they might have a feels bad moment, or they might not like this aspect, like, okay, balance that out against the idea that you're working on, the whatever your core design or your core mechanics, whatever your core philosophy for that game is this opposing that, or is it accentuating that? Like if
Absolutely.
you have a bunch of just like exploding dice, let's say use that, because we both have our opinions on that, and we've used them and we haven't used them in various games. Some people are immediately turned off by a game that has exploding dice, and some people are like, this is awesome because cool things can happen. And it just depends on the feeling of your game. If you want those big cool moments there and everything, that's a mechanic to put in there because you get that excitement around the table. But if you're trying to make a game that's like very basically 100% calculable all the time, and you're removing as many variables as you possibly can and all that, then no, it doesn't fit. But again, neither one of those is a right or wrong answer. It just depends on what your feeling that you're going for is.
We could go on for hours, but I bet you Helena has more questions.
Yes. We just got a question by another Eric Vulgaris here in the comments, about how about how COVID has changed your game design processes.
Well, it stopped me from designing games. I'm done designing games. I'm finished.
Yep. Christmas is canceled, kids. No more games.
Sorry. No, it's funny. So we are at a weird point. Now, actually, no, Michael and I are opposite points, in fact. So I actually did stop most of my design on new stuff when we're around that time of year, generally speaking, in our cycle, when we're doing, when most of the projects I'm working on are in mid development. So the vision is done. We've already played several prototypes that we know are in the right direction, that are working. So now we're doing a lot more of the technical design, handoff to development for that. So that, yes, we do a lot of digital playtesting, which has pros and cons. You'll hear about that all weekend here at Gen Con, so I'm not going to bore you with more of that. But it's no substitute, right? It's no substitute for face-to-face testing. So what I stopped doing was making brand new games that I need to test face-to-face in order to make sure they're the right type of fun. But I have enough projects right now at CMON that are in the stage of development that we can just be doing mechanical digital playtesting, that I don't even have to answer that question. And luckily, one of the great things about being at CMON is we have so many projects. We're never starved. We're never like looking for something to work on. If this lasts longer, I'm just going to move on to another project, like one of the source games that we have that's already designed, and then move on to that personally. But Michael is actually working on a brand new game.
Yeah, so actually a few brand new games that have just come into existence over the last few months, some of which we can talk about more than others, like Masters Universe being one of them. But that definitely became into one of the challenges there about, okay, so we're designing something from the ground up now, and any testing or whatnot that we do or design dev has to be done purely digital, because this is the new age we live in. And fun fact for me, I am actually stuck in Canada for the last 6 months because it would be very hard for me to get back across the border and then come back. And unfortunately, all my relatives and whatnot are here. So it's a matter of I can go back to the US, but then I don't know if I could get back here. So I've been stuck here in a brand new place for the last 6 months. Stuck. But as a result, I have zero resources here that I didn't have. I had to build everything from the ground up, and of course my player base and play testers and all that are back home, so everything had to be adapted to do digital. And so Zoom has become a big thing. The Zoom backgrounds have become the fun of every day, about hey, what cool digital background or trick are people going to play there. Some various online programs to use for play testing and getting ideas like that. And then luckily, the dev process, as Eric said, that has remained kind of unchanged for the time being. The playtesting process definitely has changed up, but the dev process has still worked. I mean, we're used to working remotely anyway, so that is, that has worked out. But when it comes to actually designing new projects, there has been it's the isolation affects that just like everything else. Because before, you could go into the office, you could bounce ideas around people, you could put things down on paper and try them out with other people. Now it's like, okay, so here we're in the Zoom call, and here's my whiteboard back here, and guys, can you really imagine how this is going? Let me draw it out here for you. Does the feeling come across? Do you get
Imagine
it?
this was fun.
Yeah. Imagine you're having fun right now. Great. Okay. Are you having the required amount of fun? Okay, good. This will be in your reports.
I require 2 extra units of fun.
3 units.
Yeah,
Whoa.
It's so let's say this. We like nobody, and I promise you, nobody has a long range plan, because none of us know how long we're going to be in this, right? And we don't even know what this is. Is this a progression? Is this the new normal? Is the new normal going to be a continued evolution between this and what we had before, or is it going to be a completely new thing? We're all sort of in the dark here together. So we are, for the most part, very tactical, where we used to be very strategic, right? Like I came to CMON with a 5-year plan. This is what we're going to do for the next 5 years. It's going to be amazing. And with COVID, that went out the window, right? We're now being very agile and reacting to the market that is not the market we wish there was. So, and I promise you, every publisher is doing that too, right? Everybody is. So there's a thrill to that, right? There's a creative thrill to that, because we get to unlearn some of our old dogmas. We get to unlearn some of our old comfortable practices and processes. So I'm really excited about that. As bummed as I am that we can't be like having this panel with you guys live at Gen Con.
For me, it's like the touch of anarchist in me, where like, I'm a little bit of an arbiter of chaos, where just the uncertainty of everything is very exhilarating for me. And just, we're entering Brave New World. I mean, and that's obviously not board game related. That is just everything related. And so we get to just, we are seeing how this is impacting things just like everything else. And of course, I say that with all due respect, because we're technically experiencing change for like the worst possible list of reasons, but that change is happening regardless. And so we have to adapt to it regardless of what direction that takes or how it happens. Things are going to change. Do we know how that's going to change? No, but there's a certain cautious thrill about seeing how things are going to develop, and also noting that we can work to shape how that actually changes. And I think that's going to be definitely telling in the short period, in the short term and the long term. What exactly as a community and just an industry we end up doing to to grow and change from all this, and what direction that takes.
Yep. Well, next year at Gen Con, I want you to come ask that question again, because we'll have. I think we could almost do an entire panel on like the year of COVID, and here we are now. What have we learned? I'm going to go to that panel and just listen.
I want laser eyes by then. I want that future.
Right. Well, yeah. 3D printed new body by then anyway.
We have a follow-up question about that topic, actually, from the Mayor of Canada, since you both are up there. Has COVID encouraged more designers to incorporate solo mode in more games?
Yep. I love easy questions. So, what's interesting for us? This is not planned, but we've done a number of cooperative big box games in the last few years, just because we try not to follow trends when possible, right? But we're gamers too, right? So we like what we like, and we've all, like many players, we've enjoyed the challenge, both the challenge of designing and the camaraderie of playing of co-op games, and there's a lot of cool experience to mine in there. So of course, co-op games naturally lend themselves more easily to solo modes. But there's actually a very strong solo game community out there. And we want to make sure that we're not just, that it's not just something that's tacked on, right? Or we just say, oh, we'll just, yeah, it's a 2 to 4 player game. Nah, we'll just make it 1, right? We want to put the, we spent a lot of time putting ourselves into the solo gamers headspace and seeing what we can do with the games that allow, only, what we can do to give a unique experience. Because we know in a lot of cases, solo games for a big box game is like, well, I'm doing all the work of setting up and tearing down, and I don't get to play with my friends.
Yeah,
so we want to make sure that that's right. Well, so we want to make sure that's enjoyable, and that's enjoyable on for a unique reason. Like, well, I don't want this to be a mode that you play and then, oh, good, COVID's over, I'm never going to play that mode again, right? We want you to find a very specific facet of enjoyment out of that, and we're learning, right?
I was honestly like surprised by the predominance and rise of solo players over the last few years. Well, I say that, but I mean, they've always been around, but it's, to me, like, that was one of those things that's like, wait, people play board games like solo? Like, what, why? And, you know, until a few years ago,
gave them a voice, right?
Right. Well, they've all, like I said, they've always been around. It just, that became more of a predominant thing over the years. And that was something that, like, years ago, I had my preconceptions where it was like, really, are there that many people out there? But then over the years, you know, you see more and more of them, you see the bigger demand for that. And just like, you know, when you're making games, you have to adapt, you know, your personality and your, you know, your personal feelings for, you know, when you're making a project, you know, you have to incorporate these things. Now, again, never shoehorn something in. If your game does not support a solo mode, don't just force a solo mode in there, because that's disrespectful to that player base and your own design. But it is something to factor in. Whereas, again, like I said, you know, talk about 5-6 years ago, that's something that I would not have like looked at as a major point for when looking at the design process. But now it is something to actually consider, because, again, having just interacted with the community and seeing how the industry has changed and seeing that there is a demand for this.
Yeah, same.
There is another question here that it's a whole different topic, but I'm actually interested in your answer. Who is the most sadistic board game designer?
Michael?
Since you're asking me, I don't actually know.
Michael. The answer is Michael.
I'm gonna.
So let's talk about Bloodborne here for a minute. Let's talk about.
Listen, let me cut you off on the pass right there and just say anything. I'm just going to set a defense before a good defense is a good offense. So let me cut you off at the pass right here and just say this, that, like, if I have ever been accused, and I have a couple times, of being overly sadistic in regards to some designs and decisions that were made and general treatment and life, it's because of this. Like, we're going to circle right back to the beginning. One of my core tenets in life is that only through strife and turmoil do we grow as individuals. So I am just trying to facilitate the best growth for each person around me that I can. And that is going to mean things should not be easy on you, that you are going to look back and you are going to have grown as a person, and you are going to be better for it. You might not immediately be able to recognize that you are better as a person and have grown, but you will have. And that's what's important, because sometimes you have to teach people lessons that they don't want to learn or know they're actually learning until they've actually learned it. And I will finish that by saying that, Eric, you've actually said the sentence that immediately came into my mind was when you said that I am the living embodiment of the trolley test. And I think you said that at one point to kind of either warn someone or insult me. I don't know which, but I took that like as a badge of honor, because I believe that that is true. Sometimes you have to shed the concept of, well, morals and maybe be a little morally ambiguous to grow as a person. It just depends, again, on the feeling you are trying to get across with someone. Bloodborne is a key prime example of that. That, the concept of good guys and bad guys, you're accomplishing goals. That's what you're doing.
So those were a lot of words to say the answer is Michael.
If you want to, okay, well, that's Eric's ability to simplify things down in his mind.
We have a question here about. I thought that might be your response actually, but we have a question here about how will your approach to game design evolve with the advent of complementary digital platforms and game aids such as Tebiru? Do you see this as an opportunity to push the envelope of game design?
Oh, sure, of course. I mean, of course, right? I mean, so designers love tools, right? Like every show a designer a new medium, a new tool, a new mechanic, a new IP. Like anybody, especially the longer they've been in the industry, the more they'll be excited by it, right? I've worked on games. I've worked on games with digital components, with necessary digital components. In fact, I have one on my shelf. Like XCOM was the first game I worked on that had a mandatory app component.
That was the one that came to my mind, and that was really cool. Like, again,
yeah, it was very sadistic.
I don't have nearly as much to. I don't have nearly as much to say on this as Eric, but like I am a big like just tech gadget person. Like I see like, oh my god, that's really cool. Like is a lot of it kind of like useless a lot of the times, but that's like the coolest stuff. Like, you know, here's an automatic eggsheller or something. Like that's really cool that they exist. I will never own it, but it's really cool. So, you know, I'm a big fan of things like that and incorporating that into board games and everything. I mean, yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
All for that.
At the end of the day, this is like any other art form, right? Like I'm not saying we've already seen every mechanic under the sun, right? But you're not going to be blown away by every game that comes out there, right? A lot of games, just like most are recombinations, but that's fine. There's freshness in there too. So every time you have a chance, at the end of the day, what you're looking for is depth of interaction and novelty of interaction. And anytime you have a chance to incorporate a new type of interaction between players or a new heightening of interaction between players. Like with XCOM, I really got to make a cooperative game where players spend most of their time arguing heatedly with one another, like the same way you would when you're trash talking your opponents during a game of diplomacy, right? Like you end that game mopping your brow going like, I can't believe we're friends, but we did this together. So of course you didn't, because you usually lose. But that was only possible because there was an app in the game that was managing intelligently and really felt like a malevolent force, a malevolent, intelligent, and reactive force against you, right? And anyway, I could talk about this for ages.
One of my favorite sentences ever is, "The real enemies were the friends you made along the way."
Yeah. Yeah, but look, at the end of the day, it's not the only option. It's just a new tool, and I suspect you'll see a lot of really cool innovation in this field.
We just released a game that has an app, right? Project Elite. Oh, not yet. It was delivered to backers only. Sorry.
Right. So, Kickstarter backers, we love you. Yeah, exactly right. And the old Project Elite had a. If I'm mistaken, I might be. It was mostly analog. It was analog timing.
So it's with the hourglass thing, which we have in ours as well. It's just we have the app available.
Sure, but the app allowed us to add a little extra texture.
Yep.
Right. That the first edition didn't, and the new version is so toyetic that you really feel like you're like it. I just love how it recaptures that feeling. I'm talking about nostalgia of like playing with little toy soldiers when you're little, right? That primal sense of playing with toy soldiers, and without being bogged down in administration, right? And the terror of playing against them with them against a malevolent force that just happens to be in the box. It was Michael.
Remember, the game hates you. It's nothing personal. It just hates you. That's the worst type of malevolence.
Okay, we just got another question from Dunsker Lock Games. How long does it typically take you to design a game? Do you design for a while, leave it for a time, and then go back to it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like How long does it take to? This is going to sound really glib, and I apologize, but how long does it take to design a game till it's done? And the only way for you to tell when a game is done is experience.
Eric,
what?
Remember what we said in the past? Games are never done; they escape.
They escape, but it's true. Like it's experience, right? Well, you have a deadline at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you have like most deadlines are externally forced on you, right? Like we are a publicly traded company, we have to release X number of games, but that's true for everybody, right? If you want to do this professionally, you have to give yourself deadlines. But even then, even on an infinite timeline, games are still done after a point. And you'll go to a lot of different panels, and people get asked this question all the time: when do you know when a game is done? And the only answer I've ever given with any reliability is experience. You'll know when it's done. You'll just know it. Or you won't, and you'll screw it up, and that's okay. You'll do better next time.
Because you'll reach a certain point where you're just messing with stuff just for messing with it. And
right.
there's no way to like teach that. I mean, you just gotta, that's the knack, right? You gotta just develop that skill to go like, you know what, it's time to put this away. I will say that there's one of the best bits of advice I can give is you should have that rest period where you take a project, shelve it, and then come back to it after a while and go like, man, what idiot made this? This is terrible. And then you'll see from without the lens, your rose tinted glasses, you'll see all the flaws that you had forgotten about or overlooked. So I do think that is an important step.
You lose empathy for the time that you spent on it. That's a big one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like, oh my God, I worked on this for days and days and days. Like, I don't care. Garbage. Right.
It's like,
it is what it is. Now, so somebody said, he was also asking how long does it take to make a game? I've designed a game from beginning to end from 20 years, 15 years, or whatever time it is ago. We came in on a Monday morning. We went to the office where the CEO said, we have this license. We need to make this game as fast as possible. The Friday of that week, it went to the printer. It was the fastest we ever done one. I'm not telling you what game that is because I'm not proud. The longest I've ever taken on a game, well, I had a game that I started designing in 1994, and I'm still working on it. It's not done. So that's, if you're looking for a timeline, that's it.
Okay. How about you, Michael? I'm interested. The shortest game and the longest game.
Shortest game we made in a evening sitting at CMON Expo, and it was like maybe 6 o'clock or something when the hall closed, and then 2 a.m. that morning we had made a complete game. No, it never went to publish, but I honestly say that game was done and could not be improved in any way, shape, or form, and it was amazing. That's definitely a lens of hindsight there. But I still to this day will say that game is amazing and 100% done. Can't ever publish it for various reasons, but still, I guess so. 6 hours, masterpiece. Longest game, I honestly have to say at this point, it's just because it's the perpetual nature of it. But like Song of Ice and Fire, that game launched 2 years ago, was in development 2 years before that, and is an ongoing game as long as it is popular. So, I guess in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, if that's still the answer I give, then we've been pretty successful at that. So we'll see. But I mean, there is no there's no answer to like, oh, what is the acceptable time frame to be working on a game? It's however long you make it or however long you can.
Well, I think we have time for just one final question. We're almost at the end. Let's do it. So
last question.
I think this will be a short one, which is why I selected it. Which games would you like to explore further and continue to work on, but the opportunity has not arisen yet?
Oh, that's easy for me. I'm working on it right now. Sorry. I'm so privileged and lucky that I get to work on exactly what I want to be working on. So I'm working on it right now.
I have to say,
in fact, I can tell you it's a Cyberpunk 2077 game.
So I actually have to say that for myself, like the big the things that I'm a fan of that I genuinely hold like close to myself, I would actually not want to make a game based on them. Yeah, and I actually don't want to mention the IPs or what they are, just because I don't feel that they could do them justice in this format. I mean that's not necessarily true. You can always make a game based on something, but I just don't feel that could be done with the respect that it needs to based on the IPs, if we're asking that. As far as the games I'm currently working on, that's really excited. Well, we have one that is up and coming that we will announce at some point in the future that I'm super excited about. Currently, you know, the big major project for me has been the one we announced was Masters of the Universe. That's been fun because really it's just, this is something you said earlier, Eric, that really it stuck with me when you're trying to get the feelings there, and you said the word toyetic, which I love the word, by the way. But that feeling you said about like sitting down and playing with your toys, that was exactly the feeling to get.
That's right.
With Masters of the Universe that I wanted to get was like you're sitting there and you're going like that feeling you had as a kid where you're just taking your toys and you're smashing them together like, yeah, we're fighting each other, getting that same feeling back, but
What would the
in a
rules
board
to this be?
in a board game.
Yep.
Exactly. Basically, that game needs to be what the coolest thing your 8-year-old self envisioned in their head, and that is exactly the feeling, like specifically of this IP, that I wanted to get across. There was just like, you know, you no, like if we can recreate that in, you know, your 20-year-old, your 30-year-old self, and more so if you've got kids and you see them like actually experiencing that in the game, they're like, yo, yeah, Dad, He-Man completely beat Skeletor. That's my son. You know, that's what we want to accomplish there, and that
Our
to me
headphones
is
are
like,
saying we're done.
okay.
Yeah.
But hey, at least we got to stick a little spoiler near the end there for you.
True. Well, thank you both, and thank you all so much who were with us for this Q&A, and have a great Gen Con.
Yeah, thanks you guys for tuning in.
Thanks.